If you have any repository of information in your life that you want to organize, but you have limits on your time, attention span, you've got other things that you'd rather be doing. I think of Para, it's not the most, definitely not the most thorough or even most sophisticated way of organizing content, but it's the easiest. It's the 80/20. It's the MVP of organizing. If you want to do just enough organization while spending minimal time and energy, Para is what it is, because you just can't get simpler than 4 buckets, 4 categories to encompass all information on all platforms. You're kind of asking for like a use case, like a benefit is to lower the stress, anxiety, overwhelm, lack of clarity that comes when your digital world is in chaos.
Hello and welcome to Get Yourself Optimized. I'm your host, Stephan Spencer. It is my pleasure to have Tiago Forte with us again. This is his second appearance on this show. His first appearance was in 2019, if you can believe it, episode 184. Tiago Forte is one of the world's foremost experts on productivity. He has taught more than 20,000 people worldwide through his programs and writes and speaks on how technology can help knowledge workers and people generally revolutionize their personal effectiveness. Tiago is the author of Building a Second Brain, a proven method to organize your digital life and unlock your creative potential. I've also taken his course of the same name. Tiago was, as I said previously, a guest in episode 184. At that time, he didn't have the book out. Now he's got a brand new book, which is called The Para Method, which goes into more detail about organizing. And I'm so excited to have you on the show again, Tiago. Thank you for coming.
I'm so happy to be back. Thanks for having me.
So let's talk a little bit about what inspired you to write a second book here. You've got The Para Method, and the second Building a Second Brain book was a huge success. I mean, how many copies did you sell of that?
As far as we know, it's always hard to tell for sure, but definitely more than 100,000 in the year it's been out.
Yeah, that's amazing. Congratulations.
Thank you. Thank you.
So this new book, The Para Method, why did you need to expound so much into Para, which we'll explain what that acronym is in a minute, but why an entire book on it?
Yeah, it's a good question. I really, really did not think I would be publishing another book a year after the first one. It almost happened by accident, to be honest, in a funny way. So Building a Second Brain is sort of my holistic methodology. It's like the big overarching creative process as I see it, which is, I think, valuable, has resonated with people, is powerful. But I kept hearing from people that they really wanted more on Para, which is just like one technique addressed really mostly in one chapter out of 18, 20 chapters, that addresses a very particular problem, which is simply how do I organize all my stuff? Like for all the people out there that are not interested or not yet interested in like expanding their creative output and reaching their creative potential, if all they're trying to do is organize their documents folder, their email inbox, their bookmarks, their notes inbox, Para is the very specific solution to that problem. And so this is a mini book. It's only about 1/3 the size of Building a Second Brain. And it expands on that one chapter about Para and building a second brain with just more material, more guidance, more insights about organizing digital content.
Yeah. So can you elaborate a bit on Para? What does it stand for, and how did that method or that system come about?
Yeah, definitely. Let's do it. So it came about in a very happenstance way. But kind of, I guess most great things in my life happen by accident. So I learned this key distinction, which is the difference between projects and areas of responsibility, from David Allen, who wrote Getting Things Done.
Yeah. Past
That
guest on the show, by the way.
Oh,
Twice.
really? Awesome.
Yeah.
Cool. David is I've only met him a couple times, but I consider a great mentor to me. I really adopted his methodology, GTD, right when I started my career. It was just extremely influential for me.
Yeah. Yeah. For me too. It's been part of my life for, I don't know, decades.
Incredible. Yeah. So he has so many ideas and concepts and distinctions. I think one of the most impactful was this idea that there's projects which are short-term, time-limited efforts, right? Things you start and then you end. But then there's this other important category, which is areas, which are things that are important, that you value, that you invest time and effort into, but that don't have clear beginnings and endings. They have standards to be maintained over time, right? So a project is writing a book, whereas something like writing, which never really ends, is an area. Fixing your back pain is a project. Your health is an area. That was how it all started, because I just started organizing my entire life according to P and A. That was how the first P and A of Para came about. Was I said these are projects and these are areas. And then over time, over years, really, I sort of discovered or felt the need for a third category, which is like everything else. That's resources. So stock photos, typography samples, notes on books, like all this digital stuff that we just accumulate. I knew some of it was very valuable and I wanted to keep, but it had nothing to do with any of my projects or any of my areas. So that's how resources came about. And then archives started when I just realized it was all getting to be too much. I needed to get rid of things, discard it, move it out of my space, but I didn't want to delete it. And why should you delete anything when you have, a terabyte of space on your computer and on Google Drive and all these places? So I just invented this fourth category called archive, and that's Para right there, Para.
And what would be an example of a practical application of this for somebody who isn't currently implementing it?
So Para as a whole, I would say, is just if you have any repository of information in your life that you want to organize, but you have limits on your time, attention span, you've got other things that you'd rather be doing. I think of Para, it's definitely not the most thorough or even most sophisticated way of organizing content, but it's the easiest. It's the 80/20. It's the MVP of organizing. If you want to do just enough organization while spending minimal time and energy, Para is what it is, because you just can't get simpler than 4 buckets, 4 categories to encompass all information on all platforms. You're kind of asking for like a use case, like a benefit is to lower the stress, anxiety, overwhelm, lack of clarity that comes when your digital world is in chaos.
Right. So somebody who has, let's say, a mess of icons on their desktop.
Mess of icon, your desktop is covered in stuff. You have endless browser tabs open, and you don't have the time to read them, but you're also afraid to close them. Your email inbox has a red badge with a 3 or 4 digit number on it. You have a pile of papers on your desk that you're not even sure what's in there. These are all, warning signs.
Yeah. So somebody who wants to organize their desktop, one thing I learned from David Allen that was really freeing for me, he actually shared this on one of my interviews with him. He said, if you want to, let's say, get down to inbox 0 in your email, don't worry about everything that's accumulated up to this point. Just put all of it in one fell swoop into a folder called DMZ, Demilitarized Zone, and then start fresh from that day forward. And that was very freeing because I did do that and I was able to kind of keep up. And most of the things that were in the DMZ folder, I didn't really miss. It just, if I needed something that wasn't in the new organization system, I could easily just dig in DMZ and search for it there.
It's such a simple but powerful principle that I think is true in the physical world as well. But in the digital world, it just becomes like 100 times more true and more important, because the digital world, things just proliferate endlessly. Like every day, there are probably many hundreds of megabytes, maybe gigabytes of content that are they're just like appearing. Emails are just appearing in your inbox. Random files are appearing on your desktop. It's just like it's accumulating without your consent and without your permission. So you have to be even more decisive, even more unsparing in your ability to just cull and archive. In my terminology, it's archive away. The DMZ is like, put it out of sight, out of mind. It's still all available. You can search it, you can find it. You're not losing anything, but you're gaining peace of mind.
Yeah, for sure. So if somebody is, let's say that they're effectively capturing things, I know you've got the code framework or acronym, and the first C in code is capture. We'll talk generally about code in a minute, but I want to get to the next stage, which is the O, the organize. Let's say the person has a trusted system, so they capture pretty much everything. They don't have random post-it notes everywhere. That was me, by the way. I have a trusted system. I have a couple trusted systems. I use Evernote, and I use Things by Cultured Code. We actually spoke about Cultured Code and the Things app on our previous interview back in 2019. So that's in pretty good shape. It's where you get to the O and after that everything falls to bits for me. I have a real hard time keeping everything organized. And I know Para is a very simple and straightforward way to organizing stuff. But let's say that you have, with regards to to-dos, I have about 5,000 items in my in things, and it's it's a it's so stressful even just going in to that app, because the kind of emotional weight of having all this work to do and all these missed opportunities that have been sitting there for so long, it kind of weighs on me. So it's not fun to go in there, and I never do the weekly review that David Allen recommends, and I don't take time to process my to-dos and turn them into things that are more of a next action, kind of organized, assigned to a category or project, assigned to a person. For example, if I can delegate it, it just sits in there stressing me out. So I haven't fixed this yet. So maybe you can give me some tough love about it.
Yeah, I mean, I think you're describing the absolute most common case. In fact, it's probably above average. Because you even are aware that there is a problem.
Yeah. Awareness is half the battle. Yeah.
Yeah. So a few things that I would look at is, could you make the filter that determines what even goes in things in the first place tighter? Could you be more exacting, more basically have a higher standard for what is allowed in the first place? Because 5,000 to me, right off the bat, I'm not sure there is any system that can handle that volume of tasks.
Yeah. Or any size small team that could, let alone one person. This is lifetimes of work, and most of it, the world will not fall apart if I never do those things. But I need to get out of my head, and it's not like it just note taking. Evernote is kind of where things go to die. I never, hardly ever, review things that I put into Evernote. So I'm afraid that if I put it into Evernote, then it's never going to get looked at again. I just got it out of my head into something that is now a capture system, but there's no review or a decision made about any of it. But I hear what you're saying. That makes total sense. I need to have tighter filtering or requirements in order to make it in as a to-do in things. Not everything deserves even to be loaded in there.
So there's a couple of mindsets that might be helpful here, because it's hard. It's actually hard, and it creates mental load to make the decision, because decisions take tremendous energy. To like, it's so ironic to decide not to keep something. Ironically, can take more mental energy than just keeping it, right? So you're like, oh, I'm trying to save energy. I'll just default to keeping it. But then the end result of that is you now have no mental energy because there's too much of it. um, so one way you can think about it is that everything you add, and it sounds like it's the same phenomenon on both your what I would call actionable tasks and things, and your notes and reference in Evernote. So you could apply it to either or both. Um, Imagine every item you're adding, tasks over here, notes over here, as a drop of water that is diluting the value of everything that's already there.
That's good. I like that. Yeah, that resonates. That resonates. Yeah, if everything's a priority, nothing's a priority.
Totally. Yeah, and if it's like that idea of the signal and the noise. If there's more noise, if there's more stuff in general, whatever value is there is diluted, it's hidden, it's spread out over more space. The other mindset, if you want to go even further, and this is when I really need to like change my mindset, I'll start thinking this way, is to think of each item as a debt. Every task that you capture and every note that you write down, you are putting your future self in debt because you're promising or creating an expectation that you're going to do something with it in the future.
Interesting. Okay. By the way, have you read Dr. Ben Hardy's book, Be Your Future Self Now?
No,
Oh, I would recommend it. It's really good.
I'll check it out.
Yeah. So putting your future self in debt by adding to-dos to your to-do list. Yeah, that resonates as well. I mean, I haven't made commitments to do these things. I've just captured them. And by not organizing them, I've not made any commitments, which is interesting to contemplate. Like maybe that's an avoidance behavior. It's not just the stress of opening the app, it's the avoidance behavior, the procrastination to even process these items, to assign them to projects, to try and figure out whether to delegate or defer it or whatever, and then to maybe assign it to a date or a due date. Yeah, that stresses me out too. And I think it's because I'm trying to avoid having to commit to the stuff that's not even doable. It's impossible for me to commit to all these things.
I think that's where the tension lies. Is I would say you do have some commitment to them. If you had truly zero commitment, I would just give you a minute. You go in right now, select all, delete. But you
Yeah.
probably don't want to do that because
No,
there's
I
some
don't.
little attachment, right? So you have a little bit of commitment already. There's some part of you that wants to add more commitment by doing that processing, but you also don't want to add that commitment and probably in some sense can't add commitment to the extent that you would wish. So those four contradictory feelings are all at odds.
Yeah. I logically, I know that I need to declare to-do list bankruptcy, but I can't bring myself to do it. Like I was thinking, oh, maybe I'll just switch apps. But no, I love things. I don't want to switch from things to something else because I want to keep an archive of all of these to-dos. There's important stuff in there. I don't want to just delete them. But then I also don't want to switch apps and I don't want to archive this in a way that makes it very clumsy and hard for me to get to the archives.
Here's another thing you can try because we've talked about archiving. I think you know the value of archiving, but it can also be difficult to do that because that's still a decision you're having to make one by one by one by one, right? So there's this principle that it's much easier to decide what to save than to decide what to throw away. This is really Marie Kondo's big kind of discovery, right? Is if you go through your closet and leave everything just as it's been forever and you decide what to throw away, you'll throw away nothing practically. But if you get everything out, dump it on the bed, and assume by default it's going, then suddenly something inside of you reaches out and goes, no, I love that. That sparks joy. We need to keep that. So one thing you can do is archive everything and then notice what you feel regret over having archived, what you crave that you actually want to look at, what you do end up accessing just out of necessity. Like basically you save by exception only the 1%, let's say, that matters, rather than trying to decide for each and everything that it gets archived.
I like that. Yeah. How, from a practical standpoint, how would you do that with things? Like I could drag everything into someday maybe. Yeah. Would I mark it all as done, and then it would go in the logs, and then I'd untick it in the logs to restore it?
I would use the someday maybe feature. I would move everything to someday maybe, which to me, if something is someday maybe, it's like, I mean, you should really consider that like almost pure randomness. That's like some idea you had just in a second, like assume virtually zero potential future value unless proven otherwise. And if you do, then if you have that, it's sort of just like whether you call it an archive or someday maybe, you just need a place that something can exist, but have no attachment, like truly no attachment or commitment to it. Where if it all went up in smoke, you'd be like, oh, huh, I guess that's gone.
Yeah. Okay.
And then, yeah, and then someday maybe things if you actually need them for the projects there in your sidebar.
Okay. I like it. I like it. Let's go through the code framework. So capture, organize, and then what's the D and what's the E?
Yeah, so code is really my model. I don't feel like I invented or created it. I feel like I discovered it. And I discovered it through studying how actual creative people, professionals, do their work. And they all seem to move information through these four stages. They capture it, basically, they write it down, they organize it in some way, shape, or form, add some structure to it. They distill it, they basically boil it down, narrow it down, choose the most important parts, and then they express it. They communicate it, they make a decision with it, they produce some kind of result or outcome. And so I'm just trying to reveal or illuminate that this is how the creative process works, and then apply it most of all to knowledge workers. I think knowledge work is a creative medium. To be a knowledge worker of any kind, I think is inherently creative. And so it's almost like we're all having to wake up to our status, our identities as creative types. Even if you're like the most left brain, like accountant or analyst or whatever, there is still a creative process at work.
Right. So where does intuition fit into this? Is it in the capture? Is it in the express? Is it through all four phases?
I think it's in all four, but it shows up differently. So I would say this, what I'm describing, process and stages and things is it sounds like it's very linear and mechanical. It sounds like I'm an engineer describing like a manufacturing line, and there are times when it's useful to think of it that way, but you really want to make decisions at each of these stages, primarily not analytically, but intuitively. And the reason is that doing anything analytically, analysis in general, takes too much energy, right? If you try to have like this clear, logical, rational set of criteria and flow charts and checklists, that consumes huge amount of energy, and you just won't have the stamina. You won't have the mental capacity. I think it's a surprise to most people that you can capture, organize, distill, and express almost completely intuitively. Right? So we can talk about each of them. Capturing intuitively. Capture when something resonates with you. Not according to some flow chart. If it moves you, if it excites you, if it surprises you, if it makes your heart beat faster, if your pupils widen, your eyes widen. Those are the criteria, not
If you
some
get goosebumps.
rational. When you get goosebumps, when the hair on your neck stands up,
Yeah.
when
Yeah.
these kinds of things, that's what it is.
Yeah. By the way, what does intuition mean to you? What is it?
So it's definitely a bit mysterious, but I like to kind of convert it into almost practical terms, which is, so for me, intuition, the way that I know it's happening is those physical sensations. There's always a physical or emotional or internal sensation. And I guess I assume or I believe that is subconscious information coming to the surface, right? There's something real there. Something is happening in my brain, in my nervous system, but I can't quite put it into words or rational thoughts. So instead, my body tells me that there is some subconscious information that's important through the language of sensation.
And are you able to increase the level of intuition that you receive, or does it just kind of happen?
I think we all have a baseline. Some people are naturally more in touch than others. But I'm naturally was not very in touch. And I think it's very much something that I've had to train and learn. There's different ways of doing that, but the best one is simply to pay attention to it. You know, I find a lot of people, it's like intuition, if you keep ignoring it, it will subside,
Yeah.
right? It's like, it's something that actually has to be strengthened and cultivated. It's like your brain, your body will only give you more of it if you do something with the information it's given you. So over time, the more you ignore it, it's like use it or lose it. If you don't act on your intuition, over time, it's going to get weaker and weaker.
Yeah, I would agree. I read a book that is just it's been so powerful and pivotal in my awakening of my intuition. It's called A Still Small Voice. The subtitle is The Psychic's Guide to Awakening Intuition. It's by Echo Bodine, who was a guest on this podcast, and it's just been a game changer. Really helped me to tap into my intuition. My understanding of intuition is that it's that still small voice, as mentioned in the Bible. It's your receiving of guidance from the upper worlds, from God, from your guides, your spiritual support team, angels, etc. That's like whisperings into your consciousness. And I've found that just having more desire for that increases the receiving ability, not just practicing it, as you said, and tuning into the awareness of it. Certainly that makes a difference as well. But increasing your desire for it and requesting it, praying for it, praying to God for more intuition to come on specific matters or generally, and also just praying for more desire in that regard. It really makes a huge difference. So just a quick example of that. I prayed for more childhood memories, positive childhood memories, because I had a really difficult childhood, and I don't have a lot of memories that were positive from my childhood. I did 40 Years of Zen, the week-long program of Dave Asprey's in Seattle, and that unlocked some really beautiful childhood memories that I hadn't had since childhood. But that was, I don't know, 2018 or something like that when I did that program. And driving back from Orlando to Miami, everyone was asleep in the car, and I want to have more of these memories without having to do another week-long neurofeedback program. I asked God to grant me more of those memories, and they came flooding in like 10 times as many as I had going through that week-long program, just all flooded in at once. Yeah.
Wow, really incredible. That's such a great example. That's such a great example. I mean, what matters more than that?
Yeah.
Who cares about your book highlights when you can?
Yeah. Yeah, really cool. So I highly recommend you check out that book. Well, whoever's listening too, but you, Tiago, I would love for you to read that book.
I'd be happy to. A still small voice. Okay.
Yeah, by Echo Bodine. So speaking of that kind of intuition, you mentioned in your Building a Second Brain book, the physicist's intuition. Do you want to elaborate a bit about that?
You mean like the story of Watson and Crick?
So one that came to mind was Feynman, and his. So he had this observation of the wobble and spin uh, correlation. Do you want to elaborate on that, and then we can talk a bit about the whole, just generally speaking, physicist intuition?
Yeah, that was just a story I talked about in my book about the physicist Richard Feynman, this great mind who had this
Yeah, Nobel Prize winner, by the way.
Nobel Prize. Yeah, by the way. So he knows a thing or two. had this kind of premonition in an instant that I think he was in the cafeteria at Cornell University. Someone threw a plate in the air. I think times were wilder in those days. And he could see the emblem, the Cornell emblem on the side of the plate. And it was the way that the plate was spinning and wobbling with that emblem, making it visible. He just had this hunch or this premonition or this kind of instinct that there was a relationship between the rate at which it was spinning and the rate at which it was wobbling. And he eventually found that relationship. But I use that, of course, to illustrate that people sometimes have incredible intuitive leaps through intuition and through instinct. But then that's not the end of the story. You then have to get that hunch, create a project around it, run experiments, collect data, try things, do things, make errors. Like that's the beginning of the story, not the end. And so that's what I see a second brain as, is a way to test and figure out all these different hunches, which we're always having. We're always having these little, the way that the world works, or something my business could try, or a new way of communicating with a colleague. But then we got to do something with that intuition.
Yeah, it's got to be reproducible, scientifically validated, published in a peer-reviewed journal, whatever, to um, put that out there in the world. So it creates that ripple effect, because just having an intuition and doing nothing with it is kind of like getting some sort of gift. Let's say you have the gift of healing and you don't do anything with it your whole life.
Yes, I so agree with that. It's really a gift.
So what would be an example of some sort of insight, intuition that you received that was important or monumental even in your life?
Gosh, that is a good question. Let me think for a minute here. Gosh, that's a hard one. Recently, I'm trying to think of something recent.
It doesn't have to be recent. It could be from a decade ago.
What's funny is it tends to be small things. Well, they start small. I can't say I've often or maybe even ever had like the classic, suddenly in a flash, I just some great truth about my entire life just gets revealed. Usually it is starts with something. It starts with noticing some small little thing. The example that comes to mind is just like what's in my first book, Building a Second Brain. So many of the insights, the great majority of everything that's in that book was not arrived at through research. Like I have to be honest, it's not research backed. It's empirical. It's from my experience and the people that I teach and coach. And often I would just notice that they're doing something that was being effective, that was so small and simple and easy that they didn't even realize that they were being effective. Something like my now wife, Lauren, was in grad school when I was developing the Building a Second Brain content. And so I'm around a lot of students, a lot of grad students. And I would just look at the way that they highlighted their books, which was in two layers. They would make a highlight, but then, as always happens, you over highlight, and there's too many highlights to be useful. And so they'd go back and add an underline to the parts that within the highlights that actually mattered, which probably students of all ages have been doing for time immemorial, right? But there was just something looking over someone's shoulder and noticing that that was happening, and then seeing the link between the usefulness of that technique and how in the digital world that was even more important. That became progressive summarization, which is one of the pillars of my book, which now people all over the world are reading about because of that, just like one little moment of essentially intuition.
Love it. All right. What was it about Feynman's 12 favorite problems that really kind of jumped out at you? Again, it's intuition. It's like you get that body sensation, or it feels, for me, for example, when there are certain numbers or certain words that would kind of jump off the screen at me or off the page if I'm reading from a book, or it's like a road sign or whatever, to just like, it's like lit up. And I know that's a message for me. I know that there's something there that I'm meant to decode or unpack or decipher, expose, whatever.
Yes, I think you hit the nail on the head. I think that's what it is these questions act as filters, they act as lenses for you to notice things. And a question is just a beautiful way, a questioning attitude, a curious attitude and mindset is just such a wonderful way to approach the world. Not to wake up in the morning with a bunch of preconceived notions that you're now going to, enforce upon your reality, but just to wake up and have a open-ended. That's the key, by the way. The questions you have as your favorite questions should not start with did or is there, or basically questions that have a yes or no answer. They should be questions that start with how or what. So basically, many answers, many possible answers. If you go through life with these sort of open-ended questions and really, I think, being open to unexpected answers, you just see answers everywhere, all the time, constantly. There are solutions to anything you are wondering all around you, but it takes that mindset to just perceive them.
Yeah. So what are some of your 12 favorite problems or however many that you have?
So I have to be honest, I don't have only 12. I think I have probably hundreds, and they're not all written down in one place, actually. They're all over the place. I almost use it as just a way of interacting with any project I'm working on or any problem I'm trying to solve. But I mean, I can definitely tell you some of the ones I'm thinking about these days. One of them, I mean, in my business right now. So during the pandemic, we had this huge explosion of business. The business, 3x almost overnight, and now we're in somewhat of an online course winter, right? So sales are slow. People aren't taking as many courses. They're hesitant to buy. They're more price sensitive, which I've never, in a decade of having my business, this is the first non-growth year that we've had. So that right there opens up a whole world of questions. Things like what is the right team for us to have in a non-growth environment? Questions like about the market. What kinds of courses are people wanting, and are they interested and willing to buy in this new environment? Questions like how can we provide more value for lower cost? Questions like how can we diversify and pivot into new areas that are not as sensitive to the economy? Like all just questions emerge just right and left from one change in my environment, which is lower sales. That's it.
Yeah. I've got one for you. Why is this lower sales environment in my movie called reality? Why am I experiencing that? To what end? To what benefit? If everything happens for my highest and best good, then this is here for a reason. What's the reason?
I love that. That's a powerful question for any situation.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've had to, wrestle with like even identity issues. You if you've only ever known growth from one year to the next, you have a certain view of yourself. So it's very easy, basically, to think you're a business genius when the whole time your business has existed has been a growth economy.
Yeah. Well, there are a lot of people who are really immersed in their work, workaholics, and that becomes their identity. And if they retire, then they get sick and die because it's like their identity retired with them.
Yeah, absolutely.
There's nothing left. There's just a shell of a person after the retirement.
Absolutely.
So how does one uh, not, let's say, live in the past, not live in the future, but live in the now, in the present? How do you do it?
Gosh, I feel like that's a very expansive question. I have a lot of things I try and do. It's a constant, I think, struggle. I'd say, but I'd say note taking is part of it. I mean, I kind of view note taking as just a conversation between my various selves through time, in all directions. It's my past self speaking to my present self every time I look at a note. It's my past self speaking to my future self if I look at a note and decide, okay, that's interesting, but not relevant for me yet. It's my even my future, in a weird way, my future self talking to my past self, because it's like when I come upon a note and say, "Oh, thank you, past self, for taking this. I'm grateful to you. I honor you. That's a message traveling backwards through time.
Yeah. By the way, this will blow your mind. I interviewed a guy named Ray Brem, and he shared the story of him doing the Hoffman process. And the facilitator had him and the rest of the cohort kind of mentally travel back in time to when they were, let's say, 8 years old, and give that child a message of, I love you, everything's going to be all right, I'm you in the future. And he remembered at that moment after doing that exercise. Maybe I'm kind of butchering the details of it. You'd have to listen to the episode to get all of it correctly, because he walked us through all of it. But he remembered, oh yes, that's right, I do remember being 8 years old and having this experience of being alone in my room, feeling really despondent and desperate, and trying to figure out, should I kill myself, should I run away from home, or whatever. And he heard this voice saying, I love you, everything's going to be all right, and I'm you in the future.
Whoa.
A lot of people, when I tell them that story, they're like, whoa, I just got goosebumps. Goosebumps, by the way, I've heard referred to by multiple people as angel bumps, because it's confirmation from the angels that what you're receiving is true and important.
That's fascinating. In a funny way, I mean, all your memories exist in the present. They're just different arrangements of electricity in your neurons. So you can do something now that changes the past, or at least your memory of the past. Like those things are they are in communication, even like at a neurochemical level.
Well, what I've learned through a lot of metaphysical study and Kabbalah and so forth is time is an illusion, that past, present, and future is all happening simultaneously. So past lives are not past; they're happening currently. Your past in this lifetime is happening currently as well, and your future. So you can access, let's say, your future self, who has all the resources, all the experience and knowledge and the know-how to solve the problem that you're currently facing, and that you can go back in time and send a message to your past self and make a difference in your future as it unfolds, because you got that message successfully through.
That's beautiful.
Yeah, it's fun. Like, if you think of everything as a miracle, everything is divinely guided and orchestrated, and nothing random, just the synchronicities that start happening. It's like, what are the chances of this happening? Like 1 in a trillion, and then another thing like that, and another thing like that, and clearly this becomes a glitch in the matrix moment that keeps repeating, and you're like, this can't possibly be the reality that I thought it was.
Yeah. Yeah, it's like the exploration of agency. That's kind of how I view productivity sometimes. It's just like you're just playing with your agency. Can you actually change something, make a dent in this reality? And it is, I often say that every task is a miracle, because if you think about it, physicists tell us, oh, we live in a universe that is just hurtling toward heat death. Entropy, which is basically disorder and randomness, is increasing throughout the entire universe all the time. But for you to complete a task, for you to set an intention, take some steps, and reach an outcome that you said you were going to reach, that is the opposite of entropy. So every task you complete, you just created a little pocket of anti-entropy. You fought the universal tide of entropy long enough to converge on some outcome. And you're just a, slightly above average hairless ape stuck to the side of a ball of dirt in the middle of nowhere. Why should you be able to do that?
I guess that's one way of looking at it. Funny. Yep. But if, there are people who don't see anything as a miracle, and then there are people who see everything as a miracle. Either nothing's a sign or everything's a sign. You'll have a better quality of life, and you'll experience more without a doubt signs and synchronicities and wild coincidences if you take on the mindset of everything's a miracle and everything's a sign. That's what I found, at least.
More joy, more surprise, more exhilaration, awe.
So, what would be an example of a moment of awe for you?
I think awe. I have this. I don't know if I read about this or if I came up with it myself, but I think I read about it actually. That the main emotion that people are seeking when they learn. So why do we learn? Why do we acquire knowledge? Is awe. It's just a little dose of awe. And I saw that. I was like, no, I am trying to maximize utility. I am trying to reach my goals. All these like things, and I was like, actually, no. The moments I love the most are when I read something, I listen to something that just, that feeling of, oh, my mindset is shifting, my perspective on the world. It's like just turning on its axis. Um, that is awe. It's this awe that, wow, this world is even more amazing and complex and subtle than I even understood. And that's helped me, I think, learn better by just being very unapologetic that I'm after awe. I am trying to experience as much awe as possible.
Yeah. Well, in a way, you're through that experience, you're experiencing God, or your higher power, the the oneness. Really cool. I'm curious. Do you like stargaze or um, yeah, anything that just pretty much every time you do it, it's like it takes you into that awe state.
Gosh, I feel like time in nature is really one of the best things. Although lately we have two young kids at home, including a newborn, so
Congratulations.
it's a pretty homebound existence these days. But I feel like my version of that these days is reading, is music, is even like watch. You can get on Netflix and you can just make decisions. There is stuff on Netflix that just completely blows my mind. It's not trending. It's not in the top 10 list. But even in the most mundane everyday places, just if you just make slightly different decisions about what to pay attention to. On Twitter, I find things that are incredibly profound, awe-inspiring, deep.
About Netflix, there's a program, a movie that was really powerful and profound for me. It's called Kardec. It's about the guy that started the Spiritism movement in the 1800s. Incredible movie, and the the most amazing thing happened when my wife and I were watching that movie. It was actually in the middle of it. At one point, I had to pause it because I don't know. I think our young son was needing something or whatever, and then we came back to it later. And something happened. I don't remember the details of it now. I just remember the awe of it. Something happened, and then we hit play, and the thing that played from that moment on for the next 10 or 20 seconds was exactly about the thing that just happened.
Really,
Yeah.
it's a good example of synchronicity.
It's a great movie. I recommend it if you're looking for a Netflix special or something to watch.
What's it called? You said
Kardec,
Kardec?
Kardec.
I'll check it out. It's hard to find. You got to work to find these gems because the stuff they're recommending to you is not the stuff.
No, no, there's a lot of dark dystopian stuff that's making the rounds. A lot of Marvel nonsense and everything. Yeah, yeah. Where do you go for inspiration to recharge your emotional and spiritual batteries?
Family first of all. We live in LA County, near both my family and my wife's family. So just very deeply connected to them, both Latino families. So that's just like your family is your reality. Second, I'd say nature. There's some great nature down here, beaches, forests. There's a nature reserve down the street that we go to every week, parks. Reading always for me is a refuge. I like to actually escape the present if I'm feeling stressed or overwhelmed. I go into the deep past, in historical fiction. I'm a big lover of historical fiction, or the deep future, which is sci-fi. So between historical fiction and sci-fi, I can escape the present moment, completely forget my identity and who I am, and be entertained in those worlds. And meditation is a huge part of my life. My wife and I meditate 15 minutes every single night. It's like brushing my teeth. It is not a luxury or a self-care ritual. It is like a survival mechanism for me.
And is it TM, Transcendental Meditation, or something else?
I've only ever done what I learned at a Vipassana retreat. I don't know if that's just called Vipassana, but just basically, point of awareness on the breath and then expanding to the body. I've just always practiced that.
Do you receive messages or insights or intuition while you're doing this, or it's just kind of blank, and then you get the good stuff afterwards?
I think I do, but I don't really do it for that. I think I just notice if I miss even one day, the next day, I just have noticeably higher anxiety, higher stress, which then leads to making worse decisions or being reactive or not listening or having more conflict with people in my life. It's fascinating to me to watch that sequence of events. And it's so predictable. It's like physics. Miss meditation. Dun, 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 dun. I just know what's going to happen. And I occasionally, I don't know if I get curious or I think maybe this time it will be different. And I just go through with that whole sequence. But then always at the end, I'm like, why? Why did I do that?
Right. Yeah, it's pretty short-sighted to skip meditation or a morning ritual to save a few minutes so that you can then ruin the whole day. I've done that plenty of times. You mentioned science fiction. Are you a fan of Neil Stephenson?
I am. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, my favorite book of his is The Diamond Age, followed by Snow Crash.
Fantastic books. Fantastic.
Yeah, all right, cool. Well, I think we're about out of time. If our listener or viewer is interested in learning from you, taking your course on building a second brain, which I highly recommend, it's phenomenal. I want to take it again, actually, and really work on that O part of code. But the course, the book, all the community that you have, the membership, like where should we send them to work with you and learn from you?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. You can find everything at buildingasecondbrain.com. The books, the courses, even our free content, blog posts, YouTube, our podcast. It's all the HQ is buildingasecondbrain.com.
Awesome. Well, this was fabulous. And one other thing I want to leave you with that, just try it out, see if it fits. It's something I learned in the last 2 years. It's called shufflemancy. If you have this intention that you're going to kind of get guidance from above, from such mundane places as your Facebook feed or the YouTube homepage, it's called shufflemancy. It's like bibliomancy, where you open a book with intention to receive guidance or some sort of insight. Just randomly, quote unquote, open it to the book, to a page, and then there it is, the thing that you needed to read. Shufflemancy is like that, but on the computer. Like, all right, I'm going to have intention. Like, I really need to work on one of my 1,200 favorite problems. I need some guidance. I'm going to go to the YouTube homepage and see what some of the recommended videos are, and boom, that is exactly the video that you needed to see. So that's my homework assignment for you, Tiago.
I love that idea. I feel like I already practiced that in some way, but I never had a word for it.
Yeah, awesome. Well, thank you so much, Tiago, and thank you, listener. I hope you apply this in your life and not just passively consume it, but actually get out there in the real world, apply it, and reveal more light so that they can spread it to others too. We'll catch you in the next episode. I'm your host, Stephan Spencer, signing off.